If you're not tapping into yourself, then you're really operating at a low level. And this is something that I had to learn personally. You're really missing the essence of all the virtues when you miss your tapping into yourself. And it's not common. I mean, it's not something that we're taught to do. Hey, at 20, you need to reflect over your teenage years. At 30, you need to reflect over your 20s. We're not taught how to process.
Welcome Dr. Ashley Wade, author and pharmacist, author of It's a Journey or Holistic Journal for Discovering Self. Welcome to the No Ideas Original Podcast.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here and really to, let the people know what I have going on and share with you guys. I'm looking forward to a good time.
This is an interview I'm really excited to have because after researching you, I'm like, man, she really has a lot going on.
Yeah. It seems that way, doesn't it?
A lot. Let me ask you this. So you don't often hear holistic and pharmacist mentioned together. Some people have the belief that they can't coexist. Where do they intersect for you?
For me, it depends on the person. It depends on the situation when it comes to holistics. So with my pharmacy background, traditionally, I'm talking about medicine, disease states, health conditions, health insurance. Traditionally, I'm talking about those things, but depending on the person that I'm talking to, I may be able to intervene in a holistic way, especially with conditions of diabetes or high blood pressure or even anxiety. I may be able to help intervene in a holistic way and give an alternative to Western medicine. So it really depends, some conditions people can survive without taking medications and thrive, but some conditions people do need medications. And so I try to find a common ground to see what you can control without medication and what you actually need. And then serve as like a liaison between the doctor's office, if just in case there are some changes that need to be made or, some alternative ideas as far as therapy goes.
And do you feel that that patients are receptive to it? I'm sure patients are probably a lot more receptive than actual doctors.
That is so true. Patients are surprised most of the time because they don't really get a lot of options because they really don't get a lot of time with the doctor, first of all. So by the time you get in and introduce and maybe some labs or something are reviewed, it's like, oh, I'm going to start you on this. We're going to do this instead of even having the conversation about lifestyle changes. Now, granted, a lot of people don't like the lifestyle changes, but when they start to see results, then they kind of feel more confident about the alternative.
Right. Do you find that in that alternative that those who deal with like high blood pressure and diabetes, they don't even need medication? I'm sure you find that out a lot.
A lot. The difficulty is convincing the doctors to take people off medication is a little bit difficult because they don't trust you. So you do have to keep a log, like a daily log. You check your blood pressure and it's good. Keep a daily log and, just if you exercise or if you're making changes, document those things. That's why I try to teach people so that whenever you go on your visits, you're more equipped with what real daily life looks like for you.
Correct. So let me ask you, what led you to become a pharmacist?
I had this really awesome chemistry teacher. I've always been a lover of math, but I had this awesome chemistry teacher and she was like, you know what, you're good at this. And I was like, okay, great. But then she kind of put me on to thinking medically as far as chemistry is related. whether med school, surgeon. And I was like, nah, I really don't want to deal with people like that, you know.
Right.
So, but then I kind of fell in love with medicine. We had some conversations, and then, you know, here and there, things just rolled out. I started off as a technician. So I worked behind the pharmacy from the bottom up. But I definitely knew it's something that I wanted to do. The more I started to like be around it and study it, it's just intriguing to know what all goes on in the body, and then how the medications mitigate some things that go on in the body. So that's what kind of propelled me to it. And now that I'm a pharmacist, I'm kind of seeing things, you know, my future in a different way, because a pharmacist is just a title. So I'm starting to find out more about, you know, my spiritual gifts and what I'm actually here to do when it relates to pharmacy, as far as consulting and talking with people on a one-on-one basis in the system.
Right.
So what, I guess, from what led to the transition from the pharmaceutical aspect to the holistic aspect, or do you see them as kind of being like one and the same?
So I don't see them necessarily as one and the same. So I want to clarify the holistic component, because a lot of people like to equate that to medicine, like holistic alternative medicinal type therapies. My holistic approach has to do with the mind. So I read a lot. I've researched a lot of the greats as far as like Black psychology, and especially in the demographic that, you know, I deal with as far as medication. I see a lot of depression medications, a lot. And it's not really a solution. So that's where the holistic component comes in, more of like the mental mindset, perspective building, conscious awareness building, as far as a holistic approach to taking care of the self, getting to know the self on a spiritual level, versus just on a carnal level and just kind of being small in the way that you perceive things. So I just wanted to clarify that holistic component real quick.
Okay. Yeah, I think depression is common, and I think given everything that we've gotten, everything that we've had going on in the world is probably being diagnosed more at a higher rate. But I believe everybody at some point in their life experiences some form of depression. So I can see how holistic practices would help with depression, because I think a lot of times the thing is to recommend medication for people, and I think that some people go to medicine first because they feel like it's the fast, quick fix, and it doesn't really involve much introspection.
Not much. And if you have to take it continuously for the rest of your life, I'm trying to see how that looks like a solution. You know what I'm saying? So when people don't want to deal with life or deal with the self component, then that leads you to go along with that quick fix. Hey, I need something. And I don't want to minimize mental health. I do think it's super important to actually address. But I think depending on where you are in your understanding of the psychology of the mind, and, you know, where your thoughts come from, how to generate thoughts, it's really hard to pinpoint if the medicine's working, if that makes sense, because the doses are constantly increasing. Doctors are taking on 3 and 4 different depression medications. So at what point is it working? Like at what point are you okay? And if you don't have the medicine and you're not okay, where's the solution? So that's what I try to approach in my book. It's a journey, because sometimes people, you know, there's a lot of pressure to be perfect, you know, especially in the religious aspect. There's a lot of pressure on people as far as image. And so they really don't deal with their personal issues, their family issues, and then they end up just a part of the cycle, you know, a pawn in the system, so to speak.
Yeah. One of the things that's surprising to me is how depression seems to be a side effect for so many medications.
It is. Yes, it is. And anxiety especially are definitely common side effects, because people get worried. You know, when you are diagnosed with high blood pressure or any condition, it doesn't make you feel relief. If anything, it makes you feel more stressed out, because you don't know. You want to learn, but where's the information? What can I do? So there's a lot of anxiety that can be created just by knowing that there may be something going on in your body.
Yeah, that is true, man. Because I tell you, man, that the medication that I take, I want to find a holistic way where I ain't got to take Prograf and all this other craziness. You know what I mean? But because, you know, I want the kidney to stay alive, I don't think there's any alternative. Unless you can find an alternative, let me know. Let me know.
But see, that's what I mentioned.
I'll come off this program in a second. Because I tell you this, and I want to ask you this, because of program, why are pharmaceuticals so damn pricey? Because I tell you, without my benefits, without having benefits or anything like that, program by itself is $2,000 for $30 for 30-day supply. And remember, this is the drug that's keeping my body from rejecting the kidney. So it's suppressing my white blood cells, not allowing my white blood cells to get to the kidney. So it's working as a fence, so to speak. The white blood cells, they're trying to get in, they can't get in. But I seen it because they give me a little pamphlet with my medication, and it kind of gives the breakdown of it. And I just happened to look at the price. I'm like, right, $40 or whatever. But when you don't have benefits,
yes,
how does anyone survive?
Believe it or not,
already being stressed about knowing you have high blood pressure,
absolutely,
or whatever condition you have. When you start to hear the pricing of that, I could take somebody right over the top. Right, hearing that, like, will that change? Is that just the nature of the community or the environment of pharmaceutical business? And
it really depends. So healthcare is dead smack in the middle of the capitalistic way that we live in this society. Is dead smack in the middle. So you're talking about copay, you're talking about upcharge, you're talking about health insurance, you're talking about even just the flat rate of the drug. What I found is a lot of times in other countries, their medication isn't as expensive. So there are a lot of people who do, or believe it or not, get their medications from other countries, and they're healthy. You mentioned Prograf. Again, a lot of people don't have a choice as far as whether to take the medication or not. And believe it or not, there are some programs, some of the manufacturers that make the drugs have programs to help people who may not be able to afford insurance and things like that, especially with chronic conditions like kidney disease or transplant, things of that nature. There are programs that assist people. Also HIV, those medications are very expensive also. Now diabetes is really being capitalized on because there are these new injectable medications to help people lose weight. It's not insulin or anything. It's something that you inject to help your body shuttle sugar around. So, there's always room for money to be made. It's, speaking from the capitalist perspective. So that's why when I can, I try to help people even understand insurance, because deductibles, especially if you have Medicare, it can get kind of complicated.
So they are. I didn't know they offer like sliding scale fees and things like that.
Depending on the medication, because people, a lot of companies, especially, have like inhalers. Some of the inhalers are really expensive. So they have the manufacturer, the actual people who make it, have programs, but you do also have to qualify for those. But they are helpful for people who qualify, so that they can actually get their medication free if they are, fall within the criteria of the program.
Okay. So how and when did you become an avid reader, and what do you get from reading besides information?
Great question. I've always been a pretty significant reader. Probably within the last 5 years, I've started becoming consciously aware. And so now when I read, it's less for me and more for the people. So it's difficult to convince people to read sometimes if they already have it made up in their mind that they don't want to, or don't have time, or there's no benefit. So what I do is I read it and I share stuff with people in my Instagram stories. So let's say you never pick up a book. You can get in my stories and at least read. And I'm going to read things that help, in my opinion, help put people on, whether it's about our African history, some type of psychology that we can benefit from. So now it's less for me and my awareness, but more of like my purpose here is to share stuff like that with people, that are in books.
Yeah,
right. What do you think are some of the benefits of reading?
Well, definitely it helps increase your perspective and your perception. A lot of us in this society are conditioned to go off hearsay and call it a fact. So you get in arguments with people and they're like, no, it's this way, or no, it's that way. But when you go get it for yourself, you can be like, oh, I read that here. it says this, or,
Mm-hmm.
this is where I got my idea about this. And so it kind of helps create that perspective and that perception of people for people when you get in conversations and you're like, no, or like right now I'm reading a book about the Black Panthers. If somebody approaches me and we end up in a discussion, then I can say, well, I read here that this is the way it was versus that.
Yeah.
So it kind of adds another level to the conversation when you are a read person, so to speak.
Yeah, I wonder about that, like, because I feel like in this age, to kind of speak to what you're saying around the fact stuff, is I think that the internet, as great as the internet is, has also been a source of a lot of misinformation. And I think people misconstrue facts, things that they think are factual because they've seen it on the internet. Well, it says it on Google, so it must be true. And I think that the internet has done a lot to move people away sadly, from books and libraries. And I wonder, in our lifetime, the actual library may be obsolete. I went to Egypt and I went to Alexandria and went to the library in Alexandria, and it was vast and, it was filled, but I could go up the street to the library for my job and it's not a soul in there.
That is so sad, isn't it?
It is.
What does it make you think? I mean, it makes me think that the brainwashing is working and the manipulation is working, and until you actually find a piece of fact that's different from what you may find on Google, a lot of people don't see the relevance. They're like, oh, you're looking at history. But if I point out a discrepancy and they're like, oh, well, the internet says this, and there may be a discrepancy in a book, then that makes people wonder, And until you strike that curiosity, it's really hard to show people, the value of reading or going back and tapping into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you having that discussion with a person who is open, because some people, regardless of what you say or show them, it becomes a fact, or they believe it's a fact based solely on their emotions and how they feel about it. Because you feel strongly about something doesn't necessarily make it a fact. One of the things that I've always appreciated about reading for me is it really helped to foster my imagination around things, there are movies that I've seen that were adaptations from books, and I was like, this doesn't do justice to the actual book. But then I realized the reason why is because that was my imagination creating the character, creating the scenery, telling me this is what this smells like during this time, this is what this looks like, this is how this character should look and everything. So for me, reading has always been about, just fostering and stretching my imagination.
I dig. And that is the part that, to me, that increases the perspective, because your brain is busy. It's wondering. It's like, oh, this is what it would look like. It's imagining, it's working. Mm-hmm. And, again, people hardly see the value of it because they're like, okay, but what is it doing for me? Right. And so if you show people, and that's what, what I try to describe in the process in my book, sometimes you have to show people, hey, your perspective isn't as open as you think. Mm-hmm. In a gentle way, but not like in a disrespectful way. Like you think you know what you're talking about and you don't. But more so of like, okay, have you thought about it this way? Mm-hmm. And people are like, oh, well, maybe you may be onto something. And so that curiosity is similar to what you described as far as like your imagination.
Yeah. That to me is a good indicator of an intellectual, a person who have healthy discourse, and challenge, and the nature where, you're challenging each other to grow. Like some people I think are capable of having it. And I think other people are just like, nah, these are my beliefs. I'm holding tight to them regardless.
Yeah. And sometimes it gives a false illusion of safety, if it's like, oh, I believe it, I don't need any facts to back it up, I'm good over here. So it creates this false security, and that's what our people like to lean towards.
Yeah.
How important is the practice of introspection?
I think it's top tier. If you're not tapping into yourself, then you're really operating at a low level. And this is something that I had to learn personally. You're really missing the essence of all the virtues when you miss your tapping into yourself. And it's not common. I mean, it's not something that we're taught to do. Hey, at 20, you need to reflect over your teenage years. At 30, you need to reflect over your 20s. We're not taught how to process, So that's one really thing that makes me proud about my book, is because it is a process. So it's separated to 5 modules. It starts out with the person learning their voice. Right. Learning what does it mean to exercise your voice. And then we kind of dabble into some things as far as mental and mindset. And I'm an empathetic person, so I try to add in that empath, because a lot of times people are, when they're afraid to introspect because it's scary. It's not easy. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to look inside and it's going to be fantastic. So a lot of times people need that safe space in order to do the work.
We hear a lot of talk around self-discovery, but at its core essence, what would you say? What is self?
Spirit.
Okay.
Period.
And spirit is breath. And I like how you opened up in your first module as you start. You have it highlighted. Take a deep breath. Breathe. How important is breathing? Because I've learned reading this book called The Science of Breath that most people don't properly breathe. And the reason why panic and depression and anxiety exist, because these low and these shallow breaths that we're taking, that when you do get into the process of fight or flight, start to hyperventilate, and then you're nervous, and then you can't calm yourself down and kind of calmly assess what's going on. So in that process, talk about the process of breathing and how important that is.
I think breathing is integral. I think, it's one of those things, again, we talked about imagination. It's a virtue to me that we take for granted, and it's actually a tool. I think it's neat that our bodies do it without thinking about it. Like, it's one of our involuntary responses. So it's easy to take for granted, but it actually becomes a tool and a superpower, honestly, when you know how to do it and the appropriateness of it. Tai Chi is really good. That's something that I'm learning to tap in. There's Reiki. Like, there are a lot of like sciences, so to speak, around breathing as therapy, especially when it comes to panic attacks and anxiety. Because you're like, and sometimes you can't help it because your heart's racing too. So sometimes it is that fight or flight in your mind. That type of scenario is created. Oh, something's going to happen to me, but you can get to the root of your fear by reading different books about psychology and actually figuring out why you're afraid. And a lot of that goes into psychology. I can't say I was ever really interested in psychology because I was into science and math. But the more I started tapping into like African psychology and how our ancient people thought about things, I was like, oh, let me tap into some Naeem Akbar. And let me see how he studied. How important are our roots and our breathing techniques, and what were our people doing?
Yeah. Do you think the lack of self-discovery comes from trauma, blind spots that people may have, or just unwillingness to acknowledge how people themselves may actually be stuck?
I think a combination of both, to be honest, because I think people would be willing if they weren't so afraid, because trauma, it can be, debilitating to people because it gets stuck in your mind, it gets stuck in your body, and it's really hard to feel safe. Even when people go to therapy, people may pick and choose what they want to tell the therapist, so it's that fear of judgment, the fear of misunderstanding, the fear of what if I can't control my emotions. There's all these things that actually go into self-discovery. And what I hope is that people find that they elevate a little bit more in their vibration when you tap into yourself. At some point, what I try to also demonstrate is the universe likes it when you look at the creation. We look for the creator, but when we actually look at the creation, that gives the creator room to deposit. You know what I'm saying? And so if there's no room to deposit, you know it all.
Yeah.
Or you're unwilling, then really how can you expect to be demonstrated purpose and alignment and things like that?
Yeah, that's a dope way to look at it. That's a dope way to look at it. I do think that there are people that are unwilling to make deposits. Like, I used to work at an organization, and at the organization we provided therapy to families.
Okay.
And I would do supervision with some of the therapists. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And a staff member had a saying that I was like, this is a really good way to look at like reflection. And she would say that every night when people go home, they have to go to night school. And night school was you basically going home and you self-reflect on the things that transpire for the day. But we would always kind of land on, if you go home to night school and you go to night school and you self-reflect and you tell yourself the things that you want to hear, then it's really not self-reflection. It's more about validation of your beliefs or the things that you've done. And I always thought that was a good way of people actually working on discovery and considering self and trying to be better for the next day. But then part of me realized that there are some people that they've just made an investment in, not for whatever reason it may be. And that's why I said some people get stuck, but they don't want to make the investment or the deposit to say that potentially I could be doing something different to help me find or step into what my purpose may actually be.
Exactly. And it's really, and you hope with those people who are unwilling that you made a deposit and it stays on their mind. Sometimes that's all you can do. I ran into some people and they're like, well, if you're talking about, if in your book, you mentioned the universe, I don't want your book. Okay, great. Okay, well, it may not be for you. But that person may never forget. That person may, not forget that they ran into me and they experienced me, and maybe they saw my book and it said something,
What's so triggering about mentioning the universe? What's so triggering?
I'm down here with the people. I'm down here with the people.
Yo, it's not used every day. It's not common talk to talk about the universe, although you live in it. You just take a look up above.
Especially in the Bible Belt. It's very, you have to tread like you tread down here in the Bible Belt.
You say universe, they be like, oh, you ain't talking about God, then.
They're like, oh, that ain't right. If you about to tell me something that ain't right.
What do you find most rewarding with what you do?
I think the highlight for me is to just inspire people to do something. If I can inspire somebody to read and they see something in my stories and they're like, oh my God, now I want that book. It just gives me that validation of purpose. And I do consider myself, and titles are weird to me, but I do consider myself a healer because that's something that I know, but it's not in the traditional aspect. I may or may not put my hands on you, but I may be able to stimulate your mind. And if I can do that in any way, I'm winning. I'm good. The creator is pleased with the work that I do. So that's how I look at it.
And I think that's best when if you get used to sharing information, sharing knowledge, dealing with my kidney situation, I've been very open with sharing my testimony and my journey that I've been through, the ups and downs, what it feels like to go to dialysis, having to get up 5:30 in the morning and have to do that 3 times a day, 4 hours at a time for 5 years. Like, there's a lot to learn from that about patience and perseverance, and also staying positive. Because one of the best things that I've learned, and over reading certain books, like I got the book The Source by Dr. Tara Swartz, when it comes about mindfulness, and I would sit in my chair and I would already imagine myself with a kidney, and I would say to myself, this chair is for somebody else who needs a kidney. I already have one. I would say it, and I got the nurses in there to say it with me. And I tell you, I lie to you not. When I started saying that, a month later, I received my kidney.
Look at that.
I'm telling you, man. And because I understand my position on this planet, understand the energy of the universe, understand how energy works, and I try my best to use it for myself, but use myself as an example. So when I do say these things like universe and energy and the stars, the sun, moon, the stars, people aren't creeped out by it because you're looking at a person.
Literally, yeah.
Who literally live by that mindset. And I try my best to encourage people with doing that. And I love the fact that you are a sharer. You know what I mean? You pick up a book, and I love following you. When you're on IG, you underline just about everything. I'm like, man, she's going in. Everything is underlined. Let me take that cert right there and that cert right there. And I love that because that means you're breaking down word for word. And the power of words are very important. People don't realize that. Power of words is just as strong as the breath because that's how you emanate the words. Words become manifest, how words become flesh, right?
True. And then, I'm also teaching people to study because a lot of people, especially when it comes to education, when it comes to teaching, they're like, okay, well, how do I study? And especially since I have a doctorate, people always want to know, well, how do you study for, how did you study? You have to really zone, spend time with it, embrace it, whatever it is. And there are, in defense of the people who don't like to read, there's a lot of jargon out there, to be honest, that is not interesting
at all.
And it's not relatable. So you do, I try to advertise Black bookstores where people are really being, have items there that elevate the people. And Dallas has a really incredible bookstore. They're having some new ones come up, but there's one that's kind of a staple. And it's a resource center also. So they watch documentaries. They have drum circles, so people are tapping into culture, and so that's why I try to put books in people's hands that they are interested in, even if it's not conscious at first, even if it's something about money or a scam, but at least it's getting the mind going. And you're like, oh, I kind of like thinking.
Yeah,
hey, get them comfortable with reading, man, because part of reading is focus and concentration. You go through these pages and pages and pages. You got to stick with the script until you get to the end of the story. So that takes some focus and that takes some concentration. I know for a fact that just reading as much as I've read or continue to read, that has definitely helped me with my focus and my concentration to stay centered. You know what I mean? So when I do drop the book, I can go and I can meditate and I can really, my introspection story is different. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it has helped, I would say. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Rob and I are a different type of reader though. Rob will read like several books at once. How you call it? As soon as I pick it up, I'm in it, and I'll read it. Like I'll get on a plane and read a book in its entirety.
Wow.
Or I'll go out and pick out a book and read it. And that's just me. Like once I get engulfed in whatever it's about, I just want to consume it and get all the information.
And I can read. When I read a paragraph, and if that paragraph is powerful, I don't move.
I see.
I'm right there, and I'm digging like, yo, it's crazy that he said that. And now I'm starting to relate it to other books or even experiences that I've experienced, or even something that an elder may say. I'm like, that corresponds with what the elder said. So now I need to reprocess that. Let me relearn this event again. And it take me a while to go through books, man, but I get stuck.
Whatever works, as long as you works, as long as you read.
That's so true. That's so true. And at least the good thing is you're not intimidated by people who read fast. You know your leverage.
You read that book? Yeah, I read that. I'm waiting for the next one. I'm like, I just gave it to you. I just really gave it to you.
He's like, well, come on, keep up, because I'm ready for the next one. What's going on?
Your book is not lengthy. Your book is not lengthy at all. Was that intentional? And if so,
yes.
why?
It was intentional because I know that people are, I wanted it to be tailored to people who don't read. So there would be, at the end, there's some reflections in a couple of the sections that say, hey, read this book. So I try to drop a couple of different books so that if somebody is inspired, then they'll say, oh, I may pick up this other book. But I really wanted it to be more of a journal. So that's why I created it with that duality of some things that I'm saying and then some journal prompts. Because I found just in my own journey that sometimes people don't know what to think. They don't know where to start. So if you say journal, people got a book and they're like, what am I supposed to talk about?
Right.
Yeah.
So the prompts are helpful because they make you think. And then if you think and you write, then you may think, I'm only going to write a sentence, but you may end up with 2 or 3 pages of expression. And I really found that in our culture, we don't have the space to express. Even our ancestors, that came through, they really didn't have a safe space to express. So I really found that, our generation is finally getting it. Like, okay, let me say let me tell the truth about so-and-so and so-and-so. And sometimes that little dump of some baggage can actually cause you to elevate. So I just wanted people to see, you can read, write, and elevate. You'll see your life change. And so by the end of it, you should see some changes somewhere.
Right. And if it's self-discovery, you as self actually have to do some of the work.
Period.
You know what? That's the term. When you hear the term knowledge of self, it's exactly what it means. It means you're supposed to figure out who you are. It's not something, no badge of honor that says I have knowledge of self. That's an introspection moment for yourself. You're supposed to take in what it is. And I repeat this all the time when we speak to educators and people of great minds, is that, you know, when you're educating, your job is to draw it out of the student because it's already in there. You know, even in our conversation with Kaba Hiawatha, when he told us our grandparents, great grandparents, and you go 20 years back, that's over 1 million people. You know what I'm saying? That means that's over 1 million people in your DNA, in your DNA strand, waiting to come out. So just imagine about your DNA 2,000 years. So because 20 generations is just 400 years ago, 1600s. So think about 2,000 years, how far that goes, along with the amount of people that you're already tied to. So it's a lot of stuff we already have, but the idea is to bring it out.
Period. And somebody has to be the storyteller. I think we depended on our elders so much so that we don't see our purpose in the storytelling and the teaching because, you know, my so-and-so is a teacher, not me, you know, so we don't really equate ourselves with that position of teaching or, you know, a lot. So I really think that's key that we kind of take on that mantle to either share our story or, you know, inspire somebody else to share theirs. Write it down, write a book. There's a lot of people who self-publish these days. So, you know, ain't nobody trying to get your money all the time. There are a lot of Black self-published people, Black people with self-publishing companies. So we can really tell our narrative. And I think that's what's necessary. You mentioned our ancestors and all the components of our DNA. Yes, those stories want to be told. A lot of the issues that, you know, our grandmothers and great grandparents didn't get to express, we're still on the root of that. We're still healing that, you know. So self-discovery is not just like, okay, I'm going to journal today. Sometimes it's, why do I act like how I act?
Right. Why do I feel the way I feel?
Why do I feel like this? And why does it trigger me? Or, you know, you may be holding on to family secrets because you may be the one, okay, then you write it down, then you can say, why have I been nervous to tell somebody this? You know, so it can get deep, but again, no life is without conflict. And I think that's the thing that we miss because we all want that perfect life or we want that easy life, but we have to be provoked to learn the lessons. And sometimes that means trauma, you know, to your point. And so we all have to deal with it so that we can elevate. And our people are so incredible. So it's like, why are we on this low like this? This is not in the DNA of our originators. So just kind of help and guide and create that safe space so people can get going and being who their true self is sent here to be.
Yeah, I really believe that our resilience has hindered us somewhat, though, because we're such resilient people. Like a lot of the things that the trauma that we've encountered, we've sort of just masked it or pushed by it, or we haven't gotten to a point where we've felt comfortable enough acknowledging it publicly. But what I do appreciate is I look at this generation and I look at the language that this generation has and their level of comfort with expression versus, you know, like maybe our generation, like the language that some of these kids have now to be able to even articulate their feelings around stuff, to me is mind blowing. And the sad thing about it is our generation kind of poo-poos them away with well, when I was your age, you know, we had to suck it up. We had to deal with this or we had to do that. But the fact of the matter is we weren't able, or we didn't have the ability to articulate it the way they articulate it. So now we're mad at them because they're forthright and they're expressive about it.
And that's what I love about evolution, because, you know, the younger generation, they're not fearful like we were. You know, they're being raised, and no matter what the mom or the parents say, they're going to express themselves, whether it's through their fashion, through their, you know, they're way more expressive than we are, than we were, because we were like conditioned. And I think our generation is so dope because we're right there on that cusp of the old conditioning versus new ideas. So we get to be the bridge and say, okay, yeah, this is where we came from, but I'm down with where y'all going. So where we intersect, we can really undergird and protect each other, because I feel like some of our forefathers, especially like when you look at the stories of like Huey, Martin, Malcolm, they did things outright. hey, we want to prove to y'all that we are equal. We want to prove to y'all that we're worthy. But I don't think we've tapped into self yet. So I really look at that as a solution, because if you can come into yourself before you go to prison, or you can come into yourself before, you fall into the system, then maybe that's a way that we can just circumvent the whole thing and really get together and talk about solutions, because that's what Huey was about. But because we needed a leader and somebody out in the front, it created danger,
Yeah.
Well, that takes courage, man. The Cowardly Lion didn't know until he met the wizard. He's like, you already had it, bro. You already got courage. You just need to step out of the fear zone and take control and be under control of what you're thinking. Talk about triggers a little bit. A lot of people deal with triggers, and they, the past haunts them. Like someone can remind them of something that they did years ago, and they take it right back, 20 years back into when it happens. And unfortunately, it's very hard for people to deal with that or to move on from that. How does one cope with certain triggers? I mean, even military might deal with triggers.
Yeah.
PTSD, being in war and maybe watching their friend's leg get blown off.
True.
I mean, those is tough. So, explain if you can, and I'm sure you can. How do you deal with that?
I mean, in my perspective, I feel like you have to pick it apart. And you may hear different opinions from different people, but to me, you have to pick it apart. If you don't pick it apart and you generalize it, then it will be easy to have the same response to the trigger, because you haven't picked it apart. In my book, I kind of give an analogy of a surgeon. Okay, they have a body. They have to cut it open, they have to peel apart the pieces, and it may take a while before they actually get to the place that they're going to work on. But then when they finish doing the work, everything is nice and neat. They close it up nice and neat. So part of that, and I'm not, trying to use it as a Band-Aid, but sometimes you do have to look into what happened. Who started it? Who did this? And how did you end up here? And how did that person end up here? So, a lot of people, especially, and people of color, the elders are like, but that's in the past. I'm like, yeah, but if I'm going to therapy today, it's not. So we have to be okay with, dealing with it and picking it apart, asking the questions. And even, with the reference of PTSD, okay, I made the choice, but I didn't know that this was going to happen. I didn't know that the risk was going to be there for me to see somebody get killed, or even me to kill somebody. So, you also have to operate in that place of self-awareness and take some pressure off to come back and be well. Right. They all, as far as military is concerned, it should be mandatory. There should be therapists over there too.
Right.
Or alongside, because it's not right that they send people off and then they have to make the choice when they come back, am I going to therapy or not? Or am I gonna, they should automatically have a safe space.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at genograms, you can see years and years of unresolved trauma that people have in their families, or family secrets that have been kept forever that impact how we live and operate day to day. And you're right. Like, I think the older generation was kind of like, well, it happened years ago, get past it, move forward. And that kind of speaks to what I was saying about the resilience. Like, we've built up resilience and we're resilient people, but that resilience also masks the trauma. And people don't realize, like, when you don't deal with it, there are implications for not dealing with it. It manifests itself in your day-to-day living and everything that you got going on.
That's that lump in the road you keep tripping over every time you pass the rug.
Yeah. Or
every single time about it.
Your interactions with people, you wonder why your relationship with your wife is the way it is, or your relationship with your siblings or people you see as authority figures. Is because it's the unresolved trauma, the things that you haven't dealt with, and the things that you've seen in your family and how those family dynamics played out. Tell us about the 5 modules of your book.
So I'm really excited about them because I feel like it's authentic.
They are.
It's authentic because it's not your traditional self-help.
Right.
So let me browse. I have it with me. So, the point of it is for people to be comfortable.
Let us all browse, okay? Let's open up the textbook class.
Right. So that's what I'm hoping to do, is develop it into a course and seminars. So I'm just letting the spirit speak. and guide whatever my steps are going to be.
Nice.
But especially with that first module, freedom of expression, be free. We're not free people to express, but rightfully so. And I want to, let you know that I don't blame our people for where we are. I mean, traditionally, we weren't allowed to speak.
Mm-hmm.
What we feel. Traditionally, we weren't allowed to read. And, so I keep that in mind too, because it's a lot of conditioning, but freedom of expression and just, again, creating that safe space and really guiding people into safety. A lot of people don't trust in our community too.
Right.
For valid reasons, I'm sure, but then it creates, you don't want to share. You don't want to share. So just how to acknowledge that you may not have understood it correctly. Whatever you're mad about, whatever you have unresolved anger, we talked about triggers. Whatever your triggers are, it's okay, because where there's pressure to fix it or ignore it or, whatever, but just chill with it for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Because when have you got a chance to speak on it? Have you even spoken on it?
Becoming comfortable with conscious thought. Now, what I get from that is being comfortable with your five senses are telling you, based on what you see from observation standpoint, the outside world. And I try to remind the young people, the kids around me and my kids here, the outside world is the effect. You want to concentrate on the cause. What you see is already done and already been made. But what you see that's been made came from a thought. So protect your thought first, and then you will emanate a better effect.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how those two things work. So when I think of conscious thought, I'm thinking of the thoughts that I receive from the outside world. Is that a safe place to go?
It's definitely a safe place to go.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes, and it's safe.
Go ahead.
Because it's a challenge. So whatever conscious thought is just a challenge. Maybe I didn't think about it like that before. It's a challenge of new ways of thinking. We think, even though we say, there's more than one way to skin a cat, we still like to skin it the one way.
The way we're most comfortable with, right?
So just introducing that conscious thought or, that change in perception. This whole time, I was angry because this, but you know what? I didn't think about that. So just introducing that component of, hey, you can think about that thing that you hate or that is a trigger a different way. That doesn't mean it's not going to be a trigger, but you can still exercise and train your mind because you've used your voice. A lot of times, once people get done with module 1, they're like, okay, now I'm ready to talk.
Now I'm ready to open up.
Yeah, now I'm ready to open up.
That's what's up, man. Module 2 is dope too, man. I mean, all 5 are.
Module 3, I have seen people flip over, not even look at what I'm saying, but flip over to module 3 and see issues of the past, resolving issues of the past, and cry on the spot. Just because it's difficult again.
Issues, man. A lot of unresolved issues. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of past hurts from childhood. Me young as 6 and 7 years old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old people are holding that. And they haven't got the opportunity to tell no one, tell mom, tell the pastor, tell anybody, tell their best friend. And when you have that type of repression, man, it
literally
forms and conditions you to become this person you probably would have never thought you'd become.
Mm-hmm.
Just by the way you think. And that form, because that's what thoughts do. They form and fashion they form and fashion who you are, not what you think you are.
True. And then again, to your point, you get stuck, in this persona that's not even you. You're just here. Okay, I'm supposed to get married by this age. I'm supposed to have these kids. I'm supposed to. So you get stuck in what I'm supposed to do, and then you have a mental breakdown at 40.
Yep.
That's usually what happens right around this. Midlife crisis, menopause. Everyone's sweating and hot.
Then you realize, I'm running out of time. Okay, do I need to fix this? Do I need to, what do I need to do? So there's this extra pressure. But my favorite is module 4 because a lot of people expect module 3 from self-help books. Oh, you're going to ask me all these crazy questions. You're going to get me all in my feelings. But the reality is we want to vibrate higher, but we're not even ready for that person yet. We haven't created the environment. We haven't created boundaries. We just started talking.
Mm-hmm. You know why we want to vibrate higher? Because it's become a catchphrase, and people think that people don't. The actual action of it, people don't realize what it requires.
They really don't. Even woke. I hate that woke has been watered down because I really was on that.
From the good brothers of the good conscious community, put it on a damn T-shirt, and now it's all over the goddamn place.
Man, you can't even. Like, I still want to take that word seriously because I get it. Some people are like, oh, you all these woke people, and I'm like, you're missing the point. But okay.
Yeah. So, you mentioned time, like the concept of time, and I'm always fascinated with how time leads to pressure for people too, right? So because there's like these expected milestones that people should have in their life, like they should be married by a certain age, you should have children by a certain age, you should have a house, you should have this, you should have that, all these different things. And I don't think that people are actually free until they actually begin to appreciate what their own timeline is around things, right? So you look at people, and I think the greatest example of that to me is, I teach undergrad students, and I've had undergrad students come through my class and they be 50, 60 years old.
Wow.
And to me, there's beauty in that, and there's some people that look at that and say, why is this person 50 or 60 years old getting a college degree? But the other thing I look at it is like, you know what? It's their time. Like, this is when it was for them. And I kind of look at that and I say to myself, like, you know what? Like, everybody has their own timeline for everything, right? Like, why do we? I guess it's societal pressure that makes us say that, you should have a house by this age, you should have another, you should have a baby.
Also the theology. It's the theology that we're taught. I mean, from when you go to church, there's a certain way you got to do this. There's rituals. Mm-hmm. So we condition our families to follow these rituals that we may or may not even all the way believe, or we don't even all know where it's coming from. So I think that is something that I wanted to insert too, because you have to seek freedom, and I'm not I'm a spiritual person, and I'm not trying to tell everybody to be, but some of that you have to put in context or read and find out the tea on where the Bible came from. What were these people doing? King James, what was he talking about? So you can kind of deep dive and get the historical component of that, and then get what you need from different theologies so that you can be free. People do not seek freedom.
Yeah. Well, it's much easier to go along with what you've been told.
Yeah, right. Until you end up on a pill and it's like, wait, where did I go wrong?
You know what? It's something I think I read, but you mentioned that in your journey, you've noticed that self-doubt is common.
Very much so.
Very common. And I like to think the same way, because I ask people, why you second guess yourself? I don't even like nobody to guess. Tell people, stop guessing. Well, I guessing with, why are you guessing? It's a long road. You're guessing, and then when someone tells you what it is, you're like, I know it ain't. But you didn't even know from the beginning. Why are you sitting there getting me frustrated for? You didn't even know from the beginning.
I just think it's that original thought. We're taught to look out for help. Look to the hills and look out. So, and we're the humble servant. And it's like, well, how am I supposed to grow? Am I even supposed to grow? So I think, that leads to self-doubt, because it's we leave it up to something else. And then we forget that we have to work that too. And so just making the connections. And so I always try to tell people that just elevate yourself, elevate your kids, your family, your neighborhood. That's one thing. I'm actually studying the Panthers right now, what they did. And I really wish that we could be living in that right now. They have schools and programs and,
they took a page out of the Nation of Islam, the way Elijah had the nation set up. Whenever Master Farmer taught, and I know what he taught him supreme wisdom, but in the way that he taught Elijah, God allowed Elijah to make some magnificent strides. And I've said this on the show before, Shah. If anyone listening, go check out
Founders Day.
Savior's Day 1974. When the man breaks down, I don't know if it's one of his students, must be one of his ministers, all the accomplishments the nation has made from the 1930s and that 40-year span up into the 1970s. This man had ships that was picking up fish from Peru. They had a slew of restaurants. They had tailors. They had their own universities and their own schools, working on their own hospitals. I mean, these are things that should make up our nation when we have those things for ourselves. And I think that's where we had Kaba on when he talked about survival versus thrival. Like, you know, we're in a survival period where we're always trying to get to the next dollar. Rob Peter to pay Paul. But there has to come a time where we're so inclined and so intelligently inclined that we rise above that. And now we take what we've learned to the next step.
And honestly, I think we're on the brink of that. I'm very hopeful. We're on the brink. And I think those of us who are aware are going back to find out what happened. I just recently went on this tour in Dallas. It's called the Hidden History of Dallas Tour, DFW. And then you go, you know, there's this older Black couple, they have a charter bus and they take you around the city and show you different things in different places. And you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And so when you realize all the things your people did, it's inspiring. But the lack of, you know, once it's gentrified and it's all changed, it's hard to connect. But when, you know, the people take you around and you're like, yeah, this whole area used to be Black, or there was a Black hospital, 2 Black hospitals right here, or this. And so then you start to internalize that power and say, you know what, maybe I can work with that. Or maybe there's something that we can do with that. And especially in Dallas, there are a lot of people with nonprofits, a lot of really dope people out here trying to build. So I think we're coming back on that season of, hey, we're gonna do things for ourselves, and it ain't gonna be 1 or 2 of us that you're gonna have to take out.
Good.
Somebody.
Do you feel like people struggle with making the distinction between personal growth and professional growth?
Absolutely. It's easy to do. I was a victim of it. You know, I knew I wanted to be a pharmacist, so that was my goal. And so once I got into it, I was like, so that's it? You know, I hit that realization, like, you know, I still got time, right? Maybe. So is this it? And so then I started that one question was kind of opening the gears of maybe there's something else. Well, what is it? And just letting, again, the universe demonstrate things to you. I had different, you know, encounters with people that are like, oh, you know, you're so smart, or, you know, you now have me looking at my labs. And so it kind of made me think, okay, there is more. Maybe I should teach people on different levels. It could be conscious awareness. And then with my career, I can teach people how to better manage the system, how manage, you know, navigate their way through the system. So it wasn't just about me in my career, my profession, doing my job. It was really just, how do I use that to edify my community? So I think that's what people are seeking constantly. Where's my purpose? Where's my purpose? But they don't actually try to connect with other people to find that, or with themselves to even realize that there is more.
Yeah. No, that's great. Are you a purist? My mom, God rest her soul, she passed away in December. My mom loved to read. We donated, myself and my brothers, we donated her library to Rikers Island when she passed, and it was like hundreds and hundreds of books. But she was a purist to the core. Like, I bought her a Nook before, and when she passed and we went to her house, she never even opened the thing. Like, my mom was somebody who had to have the actual pages in her hand and turn the pages. So you consider yourself a purist?
Yes. Just because I connect with it better. And, you know, again, to Rob's point, I'm underlining. If I'm intrigued, I'm wow, and you know, on the side, and you know, because you get to think and process through it. And also, I'm a little bit older, so, you know, hard copies do it for me.
Yeah, it's something about the smell of a book, though, that you do. Cracking open a book, you do appreciate. It took me a while, but I do audio books also.
Okay.
I do read books on my phone. I think I got into audio books with my commute, you know, like
that makes sense.
audio books, podcasts, things like that. And reading on my iPad, I do some of also. I don't know if I don't consider myself a purist because I don't like the storage aspect.
I see. Good point.
On the books, but the storage aspect and the actual the physical copies are great for sharing. So when I have physical copies of something, I read and Rob, read this, check this out.
I love that.
Thing, and it makes it easier to share. But it's something about like a lot of people who are readers, I find to be like real purists that really appreciate opening that book.
Yeah, because no one does it. I do some work, some community work where I'm at the jail, and I might walk around with a book just to prove a point, or just to be seen with a book, and that's a conversation starter. What are you reading? Why do you have a book? So they already know at that point something's different about her, and I think that's what we all can do is just really just promote that enlightenment, because I think a lot of the perception of our culture is just perception. There are readers out here, a lot of us, there are enlightened people out here, a lot of us, but you may walk right past the other person and not know it, and really have had maybe have missed an opportunity to have a really elevating conversation. And so when I have the book, it's just people just may want to talk randomly. And so I just take that as an opportunity to share. And sometimes it doesn't go deep, because a lot of people are like, oh, Lord, when she come over here, it's going to be deep. But it's not deep all the time. So I try to discern and gauge where you want the conversation to go. But, if you got some time and I got time, who knows?
But good conversation should be thought-provoking, right?
Absolutely.
It should. Yeah, you should leave the conversation learning something new or rethinking something that you once thought. Like, I don't understand why a person wouldn't want to engage in a thought-provoking conversation.
You'd be surprised. But again, you said stuck. You mentioned stuck. Some people are like, I'd rather not. I'm cool over here where I'm at. I'm cool.
I would refer a book to somebody. People like, here you go, Rob, on his Martin Luther King marathon, Malcolm X business. I'm like, bro, just listen, man. It might save your life.
It will save your life.
Because how you living right now, you're going backwards on me, bro.
Fearful, that's fearful of learning something, though.
That's all it is, bro. The fear of the unknown, man. And that's when you're supposed to take the most risk. Is when you want to know something, man. And of course, it's gonna make you a little uncomfortable.
But that's where the growth comes, though.
That's where the growth comes from. All growth is not gonna be easy.
Preach your word.
You're coming to this planet through a very narrow area where the pressure that a woman feels is equivalent to 40,000. Almost 40 bones being fractured at the same time. I can't even imagine that type of pain.
I can't even imagine.
The moment you lay that baby in that woman's hands, pain?
Period. Wait, what was this?
Love takes over immediately, bro. So, a little bit of pain, I'm with the discomfort. Trust me, after being on dialysis 5.5 years, and 4.5 years on the 5, dealing with getting cannulated and, your body going through so many different things, just stay the course, bro. And it works. It will work. Stay the course.
Period.
Give us 3 must-read books for anybody seeking personal growth.
Look the part I was waiting for. Let me get my pen ready. Hold on. I need a pen. Go ahead. We got to take
the first one. The first one I'm going to say is, I brought it. It's Light from Ancient Africa by Naeem Akbar.
Okay.
Any of Naeem Akbar's game.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Right. The second one I would recommend is Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself by Nadra Glover Tawwab. She's a Black therapist beast. It's called Set Boundaries, Find Peace, A Guide to Reclaiming Yourself. And then let me see what else. Oh, and then I think the last one that I would recommend is this guided journal.
Okay.
Written in stone. It's a guided journal. It's a 40-day guided journal, because I feel like, you can read and read and read, but sometimes if you don't find the application or you don't find the insight in it, then it becomes jargon, right?
Yep.
Just something you heard or something you read. So you have to practice it by, still stimulating and exercising your mind. So 2 books to read and then a book to journal.
Did you we had Tor Abrams on, and he's a motivational speaker. He did a TEDx talk out of UK, and I was asking him if he ever read Brene Brown. Have you ever read any of her stuff?
No.
She does a lot of work around vulnerability. She has a great book called Dan Greatly. Brene Brown.
I'm definitely gonna look up Brene Brown. I love that. I mean, and again, that is definitely needed in our community. Vulnerability. Definitely aids in that growth.
So tell people where they could get the book at.
Yo, so you can get the book on my website. It's going to have some updates soon, but right now, readwithdrwade.com. I have some merch on there. You can get my book on there. It will be updating soon, so play around with it while you can. It's also available on Amazon. So it's at a little bit more of a discounted price on Amazon. The good thing is if you order it from my website, I get to personalize that, and I love to do that. There's just something about receiving energy from another person that you don't know or may not ever meet, and you're just like, wow, that was really solid. And so I like to just impart some insight and wisdom to anybody that orders the book from my website. So that's the ideal place because I can actually deposit into the spirit. But it's definitely available also on Amazon. Books A Million, Barnes and Nobles, those type places also. I'm working on getting it in some of the local bookstores, but again, I'm balancing my career and my business, so I'm working on those things.
Out there hustling, sis.
Nice. So before we let you go just to go back for a second, talk a little bit about boundaries and the importance of boundaries.
When that book, she specifically said, set boundaries, find peace. That is a true story. If you don't have boundaries, there's no way you're going to find peace. You're going to constantly be struggling with yourself as far as your decisions. And you also may struggle with overextending yourself. Then that may grow into some resentment. It may grow into low self-esteem, shrinking yourself. And so we have to start getting comfortable with boundaries. In our community, it's kind of uncomfortable. We're used to seeing our elders be the staples, always doing something for this family and that person, and which is good. I believe in community, but I also believe in self-preservation, especially under the umbrella of self-love, self-awareness. If you don't preserve, then we want you to have that longevity. We want you to have mental soundness. So there's no way that you can have that mental soundness without learning to establish boundaries. Her book kind of talks about learning why we don't have boundaries, which is a good place to reflect. Because I don't think we don't set boundaries because we don't want boundaries. Most of us do want boundaries. We just don't know how to set them.
Yeah.
Right.
But you will find yourself in your peace. Definitely.
Kabbalah Walker said, we don't need ministers to tell us we're spiritual. We don't need economists to tell us we're rich. We don't really need educators to tell us we're smart.
Period.
But we do need educators to lay out a formula that helps us embrace our genius. And that's exactly what you do, sis. God bless you. And I had to say that to you, man. God bless you.
I appreciate that. I receive your wisdom,
all your knowledge. Keep sharing. Listen, man, I'm paying attention. I am. So I appreciate
Dr.
you.
Ashley Wade, Instagram, Read with Dr. Wade. Thank you. We appreciate you for joining us.